Hello and welcome to Elena Meets the Author. This podcast explores how authors create a world that we can escape into. Join me as we demystify the magic that keeps us turning the page. Today I'm speaking to someone whose career has had him kicked, punched, sworn at. He's had his life threatened. No, not a professional wrestler. I'm talking to Michael Cecchi Azzolina, who has worked in several of Manhattan's top restaurants for the past 40 years. The Water Club, the River Cafe, Raoul's, Minetta Tavern, and Le Cuckoo, to name a few. Michael has worked as a server, a captain, a maitre d', a manager. I met Michael a few weeks ago at his own chic and delicious restaurant, Cecchi's, in the West Village, which I loved and plan to go back to. Michael's book, Your Table is Ready, Tales of a New York City Maitre d', reveals what really goes on in front of house in these fine dining establishments, especially in the heady. Think of Michael Douglas in the movie Wall Street, Gordon Gekko, Greed is Good days, pre-Me Too, pre-social media, 1980s, when money, booze, cocaine, and sex flowed like tap water. Michael has had a front row seat at both the good and the bad times. He lost a lot of friends during the AIDS crisis in 1980s, and 20 years later, he lost beloved clients in 9/11. While his book gives a no-holds-barred look at what really went on in top restaurants, it is also a story of New York City from a native New Yorker, a colorful city full of colorful people, a city that people love in spite of itself. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Elena. It's great to be here.
You have so many choice stories in your book. And the Brooklyn mobster accents that you do on the audible narration are impressive. It makes sense that you also had a career in acting. I'd like to start off by asking you to read from your introduction, just to give listeners a sense of the wild ride to come.
Sure, I can do that.
Thank you.
From the moment I trained as a waiter, we'd yet been neutered into servers, inexperienced, eager, excited. I fell in love with the restaurant business. 35 years later, I'm still at it. I haven't served a table in years, at least not all the way through. Yet here I am, still toiling away, greeting guests, overseeing staff, and doing my best to create an environment of good food and great atmosphere, and hopefully bring a bit of sustenance and joy to my guests. Restaurants have served as the family I never had. Nothing matches the feeling I get when I'm in a packed dining room. The bar full, guests talking, laughing, having a cocktail or a glass of wine while waiting for a meal. I get comfort from the families who come, the couples, the dates, the music, the dim lights, the laughter, conversations, orders being taken, drinks poured, the clatter of plates, the clanging of silverware, glasses tapped together in toast, a bartender's shaker, the sound of the ice and liquor slamming against the top and sides of the tin. I still salivate at the sound. The arguments, the nasty customers, it's all a grand symphony to me. It's why I love this sometimes shitty business, and why many others like me are drawn to it. We restaurant workers are a bunch of misfits, many of us unable to work a real job, one in an office or a factory, or the millions of variants we call normal. Many in the business, especially the front of house, are transient. I never met anyone who grew up wanting to be a server. Most are there because they needed work in college or something temporary because of a lost position, or they are pursuing other careers and take a restaurant job while they wait for something in their desired line of work. And there are those who do this every day and have made a career out of it. To all of you, I tip my hat. Restaurant jobs are plentiful, and honestly, what does it take to write down hamburger on a piece of paper, walk to a machine, punch the order in, pick up the food when it's ready, bring it to the table, drop a check once the meal is finished, then collect the money? You don't need an advanced degree or to be highly intelligent, though many of those I've worked with over the years are incredibly so. Though it does take a special sort of person to put up with the long hours, the demands of the customers, the multitasking, the sometimes awful ownership, the shit managerial staff, the abusive chefs and cooks. Yet there's a beauty in all of it. A well-run dining room is an art, a ballet, a confluence of pieces that come together to bring a guest a meal. Our guests come not just for sustenance, but to celebrate birthdays, anniversaries, a wedding, a death, a date, friends getting together, the pursuit of sex, love. It's all happening on any given night, And on any given night, most of my working life has been spent in this environment. I am just a piece in the show. For many years, restaurants enabled me artistically, socially, and sexually. I've met the loves of my life in restaurants. My greatest friends have worked alongside me, and many are still my friends, even though the name above the door has changed numerous times for us. I've had trysts, got naked, fucked, laughed, drank, drugged, puked, and shared the gamut of our human existence in restaurants. It's now time to share these experiences, the people, the food, the insanity of the places so many of us take for granted.
Thank you. That was great. I guess we could start off by just talking about the genesis of the book. What made you decide to write it?
I had an acting career for many years. In fact, restaurants supported my theater habit. I worked and never made much money. So as an actor, you're a storyteller. And when I was at restaurants and working, I told stories. I told stories about the wacky things that happened to me, to restaurants, to other guests. People have come in, and people always said, well, you should write this down. You should write this down. You should write this down. So 30-odd years later, I decided to write it down. And I was the maitre d' at Le Coucou, and I was also a manager. So once the last table is seated, and there were a couple of nights a week I had to close the restaurant, I really had nothing to do. So I'm standing there, and I figured, let me start writing. And I did. I went in the back of the maitre d' stand and started typing away. And I got about halfway. Well, no, I got about 70 pages in. And one of my guests was a known writer, a known food writer. And he's walking out one day, and I said, I think I'm writing a book. Can I send it to you? And, let me know what you think. And he said, yeah, sure, of course. So I did. And he sent it back a few days later with notes. And he said, you need to do this, this, and this. So I responded to the notes, and we had a back and forth for about, 3 or 4 weeks. I probably wrote another 100 pages. And he said, okay, that's it. Stop bothering me. You're a writer. Go finish your book. At that time, it was. It still remains to be seen if I'm a writer, but the book.
I think you are.
Yeah. So right at this time, my young daughter was born, and I was working full time. I had a newborn, and I stopped writing and just didn't do it. And about a year and a half later, COVID happens. And I was, lost my job. And my wife and I and some family members and our daughter went up to a farm in the middle of nowhere in upstate New York. And we're up there. And while I'm up there, a former host of mine sends me an email from someone out in LA who's offering writing scholarships to any restaurant worker that's a writer and happened to be unemployed. How's that for a niche?
Wow.
So I applied for this writing scholarship. I got it. And it was a 10-week workshop where you had to commit to 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours a night to write. And we did remotely, I think, two or three nights a week. We'd have these talks with other writers who were in the program. Probably about 8 of us were doing it. So it's a 10-week program. I finished the 10-week program. And at the end of it, you get an evaluation. And I'm now at this farm in the middle of nowhere. So the only reception I got on my phone was in the middle of a cow field. So I take a chair and I trudge out to the middle of a cow field. I sit down, the phone rings, I get the evaluation, and it was very good. So hang up the phone, and I'm thinking, now what? The cows are looking at me. We're in the middle of COVID, and my phone rings. And it's a former customer of mine calling to check in. How are you? What's going on? What are you doing? I said, I'm well, broke, haven't worked in a long time, but just finished the book. He said, what's the book? I said, it's a front of house kitchen confidential. He goes, oh, that sounds interesting. I says, well, if you happen to know any literary agents, let me know. He says, I know a few. Let me see what I can do for you. Hang up the phone. The next day, I get an email from a literary agent saying, I heard I should read your book. I send him the book. He writes back to me 2 weeks later. I love it. Stand by. And 2 weeks after that, we got a publishing. Oh, he signed me. 2 weeks after that, he signed me. And
Wow.
then about a month later, we got a publishing deal. And the book came out. Well, it takes about a year. About a year later, the book came out.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's great.
Yeah. And I met you with the editor.
Yes.
My friend.
My editor,
Yeah.
Elizabeth Beyer from
Yeah.
St. Martin's Press. Yes.
I love her.
Yeah.
That was funny.
So do I.
Yeah, she's great. Wow. What a story. Well, you make it sound so easy.
You know what? Honestly, I don't tell this to writers because I'm afraid they'll kill me because it's so hard. But I guess people will hear this now. But it was
Well, you're a great storyteller, and
Thank you.
you have so many stories. So, you should have written this, and I'm glad you did. I want to start off with, not start off, we've already moved on from starting, your childhood in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And how serving at your uncle's poker games and being an altar boy gave you a sense that maybe the restaurant business could be for you.
When I started to write the book,
Yeah.
and I started thinking, how did I get into this business? How did I get to be a waiter? And I just started thinking, and I kind of always did it. I was an altar boy, you're right. And when you're an altar boy, you serve mass. And what's serving mass? You assist the priest, and you get the wine and the host, and you bring it out, and you get the linens, which are the tablecloths to cover the altar, and you polish the gold, and you set up the cruets with the wine and the water, and you're there and you're serving. And I thought, well, wow, my restaurant career really started in church. Mm-hmm. And then on weekends, some weekends, I come from this very Italian, Sicilian background neighborhood, and a lot of poker playing, booze drinking guys. My mother played poker, and they would come for poker games. And they would come sit there, and they'd come to the living room, and they'd be smoking cigarettes, and they'd be drinking. And I thought, I like to hang out with those guys. It was kind of cool. I was 6 or 7 years old. And I would change the ashtrays. I needed a drink. I'd run in the kitchen, get them a drink. And there I was. I was serving drinks and cleaning ashtrays, which till no smoking happened in restaurants is what you did.
Wow.
And so I thought that really was the genesis of it. And I loved it. It was fun. It got me to be around all these really cool, though, albeit crazy people.
Yeah. This is when you were 6 or 7.
Yeah.
The
and went
altar
on,
boy,
for whatever.
Yeah, exactly. In the altar boy job, there was a little bit of skimming money off the plate.
The neighborhood I grew up in, it's you had three paths in life. Generally, you were sanitation, police, or mob. And the ethos of the time, whether you were sanitation, police, or the mob, was get what you can and take what you can get because no one's going to give it to you. This is the mentality. It was very tribal, and that's what I grew up in. And so after Mass, we'd sell the Catholic newspaper called The Tablet. We'd go outside and sell the tablet, and then it was 10 cents a copy. And there we were, these cute altar boys, tablet, 10 cents a copy, collecting the money. And then the money from the poor boxes would come in, and we'd go back in the rectory, and we would take $5 off the top to buy a nickel bag of pot. And then we go sneak some wine before the priest can get it because the bottle was already open, and we get some wine, and we'd have $5. Actually, we'd get $6 because $5 was for the pot, and then we go get high behind the church, and then with the last $1, we'd go to the luncheonette on the corner and get coffee and toast because we were hungry.
Of course, you were hungry. God, it's great. I love the start of your book.
This was normal. It wasn't out of the ordinary. It's like, oh yeah, of course we're going to do this.
Exactly. And the candy shop just sort of continued.
My first real job in a restaurant was as a soda jerk, which started as a guy who would put the newspapers back together when there were newspapers. But I went behind the fountain making egg creams and malteds for the neighborhood people. And then I became a short order cook and eggs and hamburgers. And I started out when I was 13, 12 or 13. So first doing the papers and then serving drinks and food, and did that till I left New York at 17.
Wow. You have a period where you mentioned you were living with another foster family when your mother was in hospital?
Yes. Yeah.
And that was for about a year?
Yeah.
And you said in an interview that your experience during that may have contributed to your going into the restaurant business too, because it was difficult.
I was in a foster home where I was sexually abused. Right. And this was in the second grade. So that's 7 years old.
Second grade? Oh, yeah. I thought you were older.
No. 7, 8 years old. And that went on for about a year. And when you're a survivor of sexual abuse, it's very natural to find drugs and alcohol. And drugs and alcohol are plentiful in the restaurant world. And it's also, you don't really have a family. So restaurants become this alternative family. Because when restaurants are great, when they're working, they're like a McDonald's Christmas commercial. People come in and they're drinking and they're celebrating and they're on a date and everyone's happy. For the most part, you get your assholes that come in, but for the most part, it's ideal. It's wonderful. And you're at the center of this and you're contributing to this joy and happiness of people. And it fits like a glove.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Look, like I read in the introduction, who grows up wanting to be a server? It just doesn't happen. But servers, when I started, were mostly actors in New York City. And 90% of your servers are actors, unless you're in the 3 or 4 star French restaurants. Then they're all French professionals. Right. And so you have actors and kids trying to make a living and a buck. And you're an actor. It's like, see me, see me, see me. I need to be seen and seen. And so you all kind of gravitate to the same thing. Or this acting or the restaurants, it blended in perfectly.
Yeah.
Blended in perfectly. And, you meet a lot of damaged people along the way. I put myself in that group.
One thing, switching a little bit, you mentioned that the closure of Studio 54 in 1980 really helped spawn the restaurant business in New York.
Yeah.
Can you explain?
Yeah, no, of course. 54 closed, and it was the place to go see and be seen. Sex, drugs, right? Everything was there. Well, that closes. What did people do? Keith McNally had created the Odeon restaurant downtown, and it became one of the first of the restaurants to see and be seen. And he got in this amazing crowd of artists, actors, models, all the beautiful people. And once, studio closed, restaurants became the stomping grounds. So you'd go in there and you'd spend a lot of money in the night and then go out to the clubs after that were still open if they were still around. But the focal point became the major restaurants. My first restaurant job was in a theater restaurant. And then the next one was the Water Club, which became the hottest restaurant in New York City. And everybody came there. There was politicians, actors, musicians. You had Bruce Springsteen, Rod Stewart, Brooke Shields, all the great politicians of the time, judges. Everybody came there. And we were written up in the society pages, and it was the place. And people were going out, and it was the 80s, partying like crazy.
Yeah, exactly. Wall Street, that movie. When I was reading, I think that was the era.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure of the date, but yeah.
That was a little bit later. It was 87, but still.
Well, Reagan takes over in 82, I think it was, and things went gangbusters. The economy changed, and people was dropping tons of money. Wall Street was booming. Booming.
Yeah. You also talk about going to an interview with Danny Meyer, and he asks you, what's more important, the food or the service? Tell us about that.
I was in need of a job. And my first restaurant closed. And I showed up for work one day, and there was a sign from the IRS closed due to lack of non-payment of taxes. And no one told us. We just were there, and gone. Everybody was gone. So I hit the pavement, and I had one restaurant on my resume. And I'm walking around the Gramercy area, and this new restaurant opened. I walked in, it looked good, kind of fancy. Handed the woman at the door my resume, and she says, "Okay, wait a minute." I'm sitting there waiting to be interviewed. I'm thinking, I am so wrong for this place. None of these people look like me. The people who are eating there look like they had quite a bit of money. And I'm about to sneak out when this guy comes up and says, "Okay, Mr. Azzolina, come on over." And we had some questions, an interview, you fill out a little form, and then he asked me a few questions. One was, what's more important, Miracle Whip or helmets? The other one was, what's more important, food or service? I knew how I responded to the mayonnaise question, which was helmets. And when he said food or service, I must have made something up. I had no idea what I said. And obviously I didn't get the job. But years later, I realized it was Union Square Cafe, and that was Danny Meyer interviewing me.
And which is more important?
Service.
And why?
Absolutely. Why? Restaurants, you go to a restaurant for a meal, right? But you really don't. You go to restaurants for an experience. You go to celebrate a birthday, an anniversary. You're hungry, yes, and you go there. You go on a date to find a date. You want to be around people, and that's the experience. And the most successful restaurants, at least the ones that I know, when you walk in that door, things have changed. You walk in, and your shoulders drop, and if it's done right, and you're in a whole nother mindset, and you sit down, and you get someone brings you a drink, and you get, you get your food, and if that goes seamlessly, It's wonderful. But if things are great and you love your server and they come over and explain things and your steak comes out, it's well done, you'll forgive a well done steak. But if your server is a jerk or the person at the door ignores you or the bartender's not looking at you for 10 minutes, it's like things start off on the bad foot. And even if the food's delicious, will you really want to go back? If your appetizer came before the entree, appetizer came with the entree, or they forgot your appetizers, or they forgot your partner's drink, or it was a birthday and they forgot the candle, you're probably not going to go back. So if you get the service part right and your food's pretty good, you're on your way to something successful.
I think you're right. And can you tell us what touching the table means?
Touching the table is going to the table and checking on the guests. When I was working at the Water Club, we were making very good money. And the best restaurant in the city was Lutece with Chef Andre Sultner, legendary restaurant, considered best restaurant in America for many years. And we can afford their lunch price fix, which I think was $25, which is probably in today's money about $1.50. And so we would go for lunch. And every time we went, once service ended, we got our food, Andre Sultner, the chef, this mythic, 4-star being, would come and he would go to every single table. And when he came to your table, you felt like you were being blessed by the Pope. It was remarkable. He had on his clean jacket, and he's got the toque on, and you felt great. And I realized, wow, it's so important that this man came out and said, how's your meal? How's your afternoon? It's very important. So touching the table is going and checking on your guests. How are you doing? And in my restaurant, when I was a maitre d' for many years, I always went to every single table and just to check in. You make a connection, People like that. You want to be recognized. That's Barbara Streisand in the corner, but Joe Smith here in a restaurant is equally as important and needs to feel that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And also, when I've been to restaurants where they're rude or treat you like they want you to leave.
Oh,
when they're rushing you.
Yeah, no. Or when you walk into a restaurant, 9:00 at night, the kitchen's open for another hour, and there's a host at the door who really has no vested interest in the restaurant, and there's all these empty tables, and they put you at this lousy little deuce in the corner because that's the closing station. And you have all these great tables there. It's like, why can't I sit there? That's a really nice table. This is by the door. It's drafty. Someone has to be in charge and know what's going on and take care of the guest. When you walk in and you get, and you're greeted with a smile and someone takes you to your table and the server comes over, hi, how are you? Or if you've been there a couple of times, nice to see you. They know your order. That's special.
Yeah.
You'll go back to those places all the time.
You mentioned what the practice used to be and how it really changed, I guess, when they became salaried versus the whole tipping thing. And then you had hosts who didn't really have the skill set.
Yeah. For years, the IRS never really looked at your tips. And waiters never declared their tips. The tip people never did. This went on for a long time. And so you walk out, this went before computers, and you walked out with a pocket full of cash and no one declared it. And in the 90s, the IRS started cracking down. They picked, I think, 6 restaurants in New York City to make an example of. And they really cracked down. I know one restaurant, Petrosian, very famous caviar restaurant.
Right.
They were one of the restaurants. I know the bartender got nailed for $75,000 in back taxes.
Wow.
I mean, they went in. So everything suddenly went from cash at the end of the night to a check, and the checks were taxed.
Yeah.
So maitre d' at the door, when I worked at the River Cafe, and the salary the maitre d' got and the captains got was $5 an hour.
Oh.
And so you made your living off of tips.
Yeah.
So you're paying the maitre d', the most important position in the room, $5 an hour. Suddenly, that person can't get tips because not only are you declaring tips, but the maitre d' became a manager. And because you had authority in the room, so you couldn't get tips. So this job that is probably $75,000 to $125,000, in 1980s money, 90s money, it's now you've got to put that on a paycheck. And
right.
Nobody was paying a maitre d' $100,000 a year to stand at the door. So what they started to do was put hosts for whatever the minimum wage was back then, $7.50 or something like that, who had no vested interest, and a manager standing behind sometimes and checking it in. But that became the death of the maitre d'. We went the way of the dodo.
And still, that's the way it is now.
It's, you know what? It's starting to change again. I think people realized that, it was fun. And a lot of restaurants, especially in New York, hire these beautiful women, host at the front door. And who doesn't want to walk in and see a beautiful woman or a beautiful man? The hosts were just women for a while. Then men started joining the ranks. And, it was great. It was fun. And people didn't care so much about it. But then service got to be more important. And when you're in, let's take Le Coucou, for instance. We were named #1 restaurant in America, James Beard Award, best restaurant in New York, a Steven Starr restaurant. And Steven has, I think now, probably 50-something restaurants, maybe 40 back then. But he didn't have a maitre d'. I was the first maitre d' hired in the Steven Starr system because Steven realized this soon-to-be 3-star, beautiful restaurant with incredible food needed an old school touch, the person at the door who knew when the guests were coming in, who could recognize the important people that you wanted in the restaurant. But the most important people are your neighbors. That's really what it comes down to. But to recognize the neighbor who's coming 2 or 3 times, know how to pick up the phone, how to curate a dining room, to make it a special experience. And maitre d's, when you do it right, not only are you the most learned person on the floor and understand service, you know how to deal with your guests and how to curate a room. And people want to walk in the room and say, "Oh, hi, Michael. How are you?" And want Michael to say, "Hi, it's good to see you again. Welcome back," or email me or text me, "Hey, we need a reservation." And people want that connection. And it really elevates the dining experience. So it's happening more and more now. You're getting to see it more, but you're still definitely host run the room.
I have been to Le Coucou twice, and I do remember the maitre d' within the last few years. So you weren't there anymore, I don't think.
No, I was there for the first couple.
Yeah. And that brings me, I remember we couldn't get a table, and our friend, he went over during the day and I think knocked on the door and was able to get a table that way. But you talk about tipping and, tipping when you first come in. So are you supposed to, nobody really shakes hands anymore with, the money in the palm. So you're still supposed to do that. And what happens if they don't have a table?
I think people still do. People still do, but not people carrying cash. But it's yes,
True.
no, people tip. People are still tipping. Not the way they used to. I just know from my maitre d' at the door here, because I think she's not nearly getting what she deserves from customers. But
oh, right.
It's just different. And also she's a woman. And it's really, I'm going to say fucked up, but it is. There are 3 women at the door and there's a guy standing there. Everybody will go to the guy first.
Oh.
Always happens. Yeah. They don't want to, it's just really, it's culture. Yeah.
Well, I'll make sure not to do that when I go back to your restaurant.
Yeah. Well, if someone's doing something for you, and recognizes you, say, "Welcome back. It's good to see you," and takes you to this amazing table. You don't do it every time, but it's nice to be recognized and known and welcomed and know you got your reservation. So I made, as a maitre d', I made a very good living being palmed. People putting $100 bills in my hand, and it was the nature of the business. Now, look, I was making $5 an hour at the River Cafe. If I didn't get tipped, well, where's my money?
What happens if you can't get them a table? Then do you give the money back?
Look, I don't think I've ever sold a table in my life. There's different ways how this works. So let's say at the River Cafe, let's say Le Coucou, okay, which is the more recent restaurant. Right. Someone will come in the door and say, "Michael, how are you?" And the first thing they'll do, and this way people I know, and every time they come in the door, they're putting a $100 bill in your hand. They're just saying hello and thanking you. Then and this happens all the time. Or you know them and it'll go on the way out. They'll tip you on the way out because they want to be remembered.
Right.
Who are you going to remember? The person that comes in and gives you a dirty look and complains about their table, or the man or woman that comes in and puts $100 in your hand just to say thank you because it's good to see you. Because they want to see you. They're happy to see you. It's a thing. It's a power thing. But who are you going to recognize? Who are you going to remember? That's the way it goes. Then there are the people that come in and say, "Hi, I have a reservation. I would really like a good table if you can make that happen." And they give you $100 or $20 or whatever it is. And will you give them a better table? Yeah. You're going to try. Why wouldn't you? And you'll do it, right? And they're the people that come in and say, "I don't have a reservation. Here's $100. And I say, "I'm so sorry. I can't do that. I don't have a table for you." And they try and bribe you. I don't want to be bribed. At the door at Le Coucou one day, one was having dinner with us. She gets up, walks over and says, "Michael, I need a reservation tomorrow. Desperately need a reservation." And she gives me $500. And my hosts are looking at me, and I said, I'm so sorry, I can't take that. I'm sorry, I appreciate that. I don't have a table for you tomorrow. But you don't want to be bought, but you don't mind being thanked.
I got it. Okay. Speaking of Le Coucou, you talk about how extremely it prepared for, was it inspectors versus restaurant critics? I'm trying to remember because you both
strike fear into the hearts of mortal men. Mortal men. Are you talking about Pete Wells?
Yes.
Yeah. So Pete Wells, who's now retired, was the food critic for the New York Times. And for many years, the food critic for the New York Times was the most powerful person in the city because he could make or break a restaurant. That's changed drastically since those days. But you want to get a good review. You want to spot Pete Wells. And Pete would come have pseudonyms. He would try to come incognito so he wouldn't be recognized. One of the things that he would do was there would be a party of 4. 3 guests would show up, asked to be seated, and then he would just come in like 20 minutes later and just sneak in and go find the table and hope not to be seen. But we really wanted to spot him. And, we were waiting for people. You wait for the reviewers, right? And Stephen Starr is a master restaurateur, but also he's doing this for many years. And he hired people who would be at the door who recognized every critic and food writer that ever walked through that door. We did not miss one person.
Wow.
Because you want to be ready. You don't want the food critic to come in and suddenly everyone's having a bad night and your worst server is in that station and everything goes downhill. So you want to be prepared for the best. And there was a woman who worked the door, reservations, and pretty much knew all the aliases Pete Wells used and some of the phone numbers, and we were able to know he was coming.
Didn't you also leave tables empty? That one table was always left empty.
Always. From the day the restaurant opened, we left the best table in the restaurant unseated till maybe 20 minutes before closing. So when a food writer or restaurant critic did come in, they got the best table in the restaurant. And that best table in the restaurant was always helmed by the best captain and the best server. And behind the desk there, we had a fresh menu with a fresh wine list that was perfect. So when they went down to the table, everything was perfect.
How often do these critics come?
And this is a very busy restaurant, right?
Yeah.
Packed. People waited a year for a reservation. People would be walking in and waiting for a table. Why can't I sit there? Why can't I sit at that table? Why is no one sitting at the table? And I would just say, I'm so sorry, it's spoken for. And people would scream at you. Why? I'm waiting half an hour for a table. Why is that table open? It's because it's spoken for. I'm so sorry.
You have to be so diplomatic. Food inspectors. That was also a nightmare.
Oh my God, it's the worst. Yeah, it's the worst. Look, it's New York City.
Yeah.
Most of these spaces are old, even in new ones. We have a health code now that when Bloomberg was mayor, it became a letter grade. You got A, B, C, or D in your window, depending on the state of cleanliness of your restaurant. And no one wants anything but an A.
Yeah.
You really, if you see a D on a restaurant window, you're not walking in unless you're starving, and there's nothing else open. And so you really want that A. So it's a number system, a point system. So you're allowed 13 points of violations, and once you go past 13, that's when the B begins, and then more points to C or D. So getting 13 points in a restaurant is pretty easy against you. It's hard. Restaurants, things are old, and so you're really, really scrambling. And the restaurant inspector comes in, and everything stops, because generally, in a kitchen especially, nothing is legal when you walk in a kitchen and we're waiting to pick up food. You got a bunch of orders coming in, and there's 3 pieces of fish sitting, waiting to go into a pan, and you've got 3 burgers on the side there that you're going to put on the grill, as an example, and that meat and fish is sitting out. It's not in the refrigerator because you have to temper it. Once you temper it, it becomes an illegal temperature. So the inspector comes in, puts his thermometer in there, and you fail. And a piece of meat that fails temperature is, I forget how many points, it's a lot of points. And if there's 2 there, you've blown your 13 points. Wow. When the DOH comes in, we have a code word. And many restaurants have a word, whatever it is. Tsunami was one of the ones we use in a restaurant. And the host comes in, and the DOH person shows their badge. And some places have buzzers at the front door that alerts the kitchen. Some say, okay, give me 1 second, turn, and you'll see it, and the host will see it, and she'll run back and tell everyone, tsunami, tsunami, tsunami. And you race through the restaurant to make sure everybody on the floor knows, the bar knows, the kitchen knows that there's a health inspector in the restaurant. Now, some will stop there and put their paperwork together, and some will just walk straight through and go into the kitchen. So as they're coming, when you hear tsunami, the first thing they do in the kitchen with those burgers and fish, they throw it out.
Wow.
In the refrigerator, all your dairy products, anything in the refrigerator, especially on the floor, the doors are opening and closing, you can't keep them at temperature.
Jesus.
So all that gets thrown out. Your bar garnishes, those are never at the right temperature. They all get thrown out. So you throw everything out. So all those people waiting for their orders, their food's now in the garbage. And we're not going to cook a thing till that inspector leaves, because once that fish is up there, if that thermometer comes out, we're in trouble. Yeah. And then restaurants in New York, there are mice. They are. There's roaches. Every single brand new restaurants have mice and roaches. And if there's one little speck of mouse poop on the floor, no matter how clean you are, how many exterminators you have, that's a violation. So when they come through the door, it's a disaster. It's a real disaster.
They need to relax those rules so they're a little bit more realistic. It's one night of wasted food, basically. Cell phones, you talk about how that has affected the wait time for customers. How so?
You know something? Since I wrote this book,
yeah,
it's changed. And maybe because people are coming to my restaurant, but it's for the most part. But what would happen to restaurants? So restaurants have to turn tables. It's real estate. If you can't turn a table, you go out of business, especially in New York. Rents are so high. Wages are so high. It's expensive to have a restaurant here. You have to turn a table. So in my restaurant, for a party of 2, we give an hour and 45 minutes, which is a good amount of time for dinner. And you'll allow 2 hours if it goes a little longer. For 2 tops, 2.5 hours. For 5, 6 tops, 3 hours, et cetera, et cetera. So once that time is up, then you drop the check. It's time to go.
Yeah.
But what happens is people will sit there. They've paid the check, or the check's sitting on the table, and all of a sudden the cell phones come out. And they start to show pictures of the grandkids. Or are you taking an Uber or a Lyft? And where are you going? And this back and forth is sometimes 15 or 20 minutes over the allotted time. Some people go over the allotted time anyway. And you have a bar full of people trying to sit down, and you need that table desperately.
Yeah.
And people just sit there and they don't go. When your time is up, go, please. Go. Show the pictures, during the meal or before the meal or at home. But go home. We need that table back.
So you said that it's changed again since
I wrote the book. It's come out. It doesn't happen as much. It really doesn't. And also,
great.
It's bizarre because I'm finding a change in my restaurant. People aren't on their phones. People are talking to each other. Yeah, you have the younger kids coming in and they're doing their Instagram and taking pictures, but they're talking to each other. They're conversing. And when we first opened, my bartender, Jonathan, when people are at the bar on their phones, he took the phones away. He says, no, you can't do that. He did it as a joke at first. And people started to thank him. And people started talking to each other at the bar. We now have, and I hear this every night, one of the most convivial bars in New York City. People come in, they meet each other. We have a very safe restaurant, especially for women. We have so many single women that feel comfortable to come to the bar and sit down and have a meal. Next thing you know, they're befriending these people. I now have bar regulars who didn't know each other, who now become close friends, and all coming into the bar because he started taking those cell phones away. Yeah.
Fascinating. Well, that's great. That's very hopeful. Last question. So you say that 80 to 90% of restaurants fail within the first 5 years.
Yeah. I think it's like 65% in 3 years.
Wow.
90% in 5 years. I mean, Eater every year does the list of the closings. I think 25 restaurants closed this year. It's a tough business. It's really tough.
And yet you opened Cecchi's last year. So
2023.
Yeah. So I know almost not last year.
Right.
What was your thinking on that?
What was my thinking? My thinking was, as I told you, I was in quarantine. I wrote a book. The book got published, and I was done. I wasn't going to come back and work for anybody. And I tried to open something before, but everything was too expensive. It just didn't make any sense. The rents are too high, and you just know you can't make your ends meet. And my older daughter said, "What are you going to do now, Dad?" And I said, "Nothing." And she says, "No, you have to open Cecchi's." And I said, oh, Jesus Christ. And so I thought about it and slept on it. And I thought she was right. Middle of the pandemic. And a lot of restaurants had gone out of business, a lot. And no one knew what was going to happen. So there were a lot of deals to be had. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do it. And I went around and I found a spot that I fell in love with at a very good price because of the pandemic. And so the risk was less than it would have been had the rent been double or 2.5 times that. It was an amazing location. I knew that in COVID, when people sat outside in 20-degree weather because they wanted to support restaurants and because they wanted to see other people, because we're social beings, we need to see other people. We need to be in an environment with other people, that people will come back. I didn't know to what extent. I knew the fact that I've done this for a long time. I'm not an unknown entity, that people would probably come to the restaurant. So I felt pretty good about it. I didn't know we would do as good as we're doing now. And that's a whole nother story. But we're doing very well. But it's a risk. It's an absolute risk. Yeah. It's hard. It's hard. And a lot of people go into the business not knowing what they're doing. I'm here every day. I was here every day here in my restaurant for 7 months, 7 days a week. You're talking 15, 18-hour days, because I wanted this to be right. I now take off weekends, but I'm still here Monday through Friday, start at 8 in the morning, finish 11 at night.
Wow.
Because you got to watch what you're doing. You got to know what you're doing. You have to know your customers. You have to know your staff. We haven't changed staff almost in a year and a half that we're open. It's the same people, which is remarkable. But because we've created this spot that is welcoming to them, they're treated well. Customers love them, it's good. So it's a hard business. Yeah. So
no, you've definitely cracked it. It was bold, but I'm so glad you did, because that restaurant is great. You've got the design is great. The lighting is great. The food, my martini. I mean,
more importantly,
exactly. No, there aren't enough. And staff, you're right. And also when the owner is there, that's huge.
It's very different. Look, when I came up in this business, or growing up in New York, you walked into a restaurant, you knew the owner. You knew who owned it. It was John's or Bill's or Michael's or Joe Allen's. It was one owner had a restaurant. Now it's restaurant groups. It's either private equity money or investment money, and they're looking to open 5 or 6 restaurants to make a profit. And you don't know who the owner is. You don't know who the people are. It's a lot of guns for hire. It's become so depersonalized. And that, so, look, like I said to you, we create an experience. And that experience starts with your heart. If you're connecting to someone on that level, they want to be there. Restaurants are the town halls.
You're right.
There are city centers, the piazzas. People come to see and be seen. We need restaurants, but you can't have restaurants that are cold and people aren't paying attention, and the service is not good, and the food's mediocre, because there's no one there that's on top of it. And you have to go on top of it every single day. We go through it. This is a restaurant built on details. I'm known. I wrote a book on service. People come in with expectations. You have to meet those expectations. And luckily, we've been even, I think, surpassing them. If you read some of our reviews, we have some bad ones too, which always happen. But it's all about the details every single day. What are you working on? Why did that dish get screwed up? Do we want to keep that on the menu? What was wrong with the service last night? Why did that server do that? What happened at the bar? It's a daily process, and we really address things every single day.
It's like theater.
It is theater. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you open that door, the show's on.
I thought of one last question, but beyond that last question, which is, are you going to write another book, and might it be about the restaurant world if you do?
Well, your friend, my publisher, Elizabeth Beyer, editor, would love for me to write one. I'm a little afraid about a sophomore effort. People, they'll have their guns out. I'm not sure, but I've started taking notes. So once things settle down here and I have time, I'll probably do it. I really enjoyed writing the book. I had a good time.
Good. I hope you do. Well, that was fun. Michael is open, funny, and a natural storyteller. I hope he listens to his editor's advice and writes another book. I love going to restaurants, and Michael reminded me why. People need people. Add in delicious food, drink, a convivial atmosphere. What's not to like? The secret to a successful restaurant, like so many that Michael has worked at, welcoming service, attention to detail, good food, alcohol, and last but not least, flattering lighting. Anyone who loves New York City and/or restaurants will enjoy this book. See you in 2 weeks with another author and another book on Elena Meets the Author, wherever you listen to podcasts.